Hey, this is Indigenous Patriot. Today we're going to discuss Trump's comments on Columbus Day. We'll talk about the Biden campaign and how they want to revitalize the conferences with Indigenous people. And we'll look at an ad from Donald Trump and talk about why it's unequivocally false. So please stay tuned. We got a lot to look into. Thank you. October 9th, Donald Trump put out his proclamation for Columbus Day, and it went exactly how you expect somebody who's been talking about manifest destiny as well as patriotic education to go. It's not a push to erase our history. It's a push to talk about the true history of things. Celebrating a man who never made it to this continent as the discoverer of America is patently false. That is something that doesn't make sense to me. I understand the desire for Italian Americans to celebrate a portion of their founding of this country, and you know what? I ask you to look at Giovanni Caboto. Giovanni Caboto actually explored the eastern seaboard in the United States, and he's somebody that it makes a little more sense on a logical basis to celebrate for such. I also understand the whole Columbian exchange idea, but I don't think that Christopher Columbus is the reason why we have that. I think that it was an inevitable consequence. What the Columbian exchange provided was the movement of plants, animals, people, and diseases from one continent to the next. That includes both sides of the spectrum. So what a lot of people don't know is that potatoes and tomatoes and corn are indigenous to America and made their way to Europe. The potato famine, look at the history of that. Look at when the Italians first gained the tomato. I bring up Italians because, man, I obviously we know that the things that we talk about Italians for in regards to food are very good spaghetti sauce, pizza, even though that's a little bit of a misnomer, but the contributions on a culinary standpoint, man, I love cannolis and things, but that has nothing to do with this statement. So, not only were things like tobacco and whatnot moved, back and forth, but also people were moved back and forth. That's not just the people moving from Europe to the New World in order to colonize, but it was also the movement of indigenous people to Europe as slaves and sideshows and things like that. That's just the fact of the matter. Talking about these things does not diminish our view of America. What diminishes our view of America is our inability to come to grips with it. Do I think that modern day Germany suffers because of what Adolf Hitler did in the 1940s? I absolutely do not. I actually respect their ability to face their negative history head on and understand that they will not forget it, but they don't have to glorify it. That's the difference. We do not have to glorify colonization, the spreading of sickness, and genocide. Indigenous Peoples Day, in my opinion, is the way to go because we remember the people that were here, that are here, and that will continue to be here, fighting for this country, not just because of a patriotism, but because our souls and our bones and our lives are in the soil. Okay? We want to celebrate America just as much as anybody else does, but we don't want to forget the history and the road that was taken in order to get us to the point we are in now. I don't want to go back and say, I wish people never discovered this continent because I don't believe in viewing the past as something that could be changed. I don't like the what ifs. Today, I have a very diverse and beautiful interaction with the community that I know and that I love, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I wish we could come together more. That's the only thing that I would change in today's climate. So our history needs to be intact, and for it to be intact, we need to talk about the whole of it. We don't need statues to remember things that never occurred here. We don't need statues to celebrate people that have little to do with our actual history, whether it's a positive or a negative fashion. We have history books. I mean, we have the internet these days. We have documents. We have artifacts. We have all sorts of things that will remind us of our history, our true history. We don't need to continue to perpetuate a fake one. That's the start of true fake news. So I would be remiss if I decided to tell a story about how the Obama administration was great for Indian country unequivocally. It had its ups and it had its downs. I remember the Dakota Access Pipeline beginnings and how rife with turmoil that was until the Obama administration finally decided to shut down the Dakota Access Pipeline. But then also Donald Trump came in, and one of the first things he did was reauthorize it. Luckily, the courts have decided to put a stop to that for now. And I say for now because we never know what's going to happen with these people, right? One thing, though, I can speak on in a positive standpoint for Indigenous people is that every year the Obama administration held a White House Tribal Nations Conference every single year. So I'm going to read a little bit from this article. It comes from Native News Online. It's called Biden's Promise to Reinstate the White House Tribal Nations Conferences is Good for Indian Country. It's written by Levi Rickard on October 11th. So for 8 straight years, the Obama administration hosted an annual White House Tribal Nations Conference. The annual Tribal Nations Conference brought together tribal leaders from all federally recognized tribes to meet with top Obama administration officials, including cabinet members, to discuss critical issues faced by Indian country. And the highlight of every Tribal Nations Conference was an appearance by President Obama, who gave the closing address at all 8 events. So here, the National Congress of American Indians president talks about how committed Obama was. I don't generally read those types of statements because they're just people that are paid to fluff up the people that appointed them. During the 2014 White House Tribal Nations Conference, Vice President Joe Biden spoke about the importance of the tribal provision in the 2013 reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act. The provision allows for recognizing tribes' inherent power to exercise special domestic violence criminal jurisdiction over certain defendants, regardless of their Indian or non-Indian status, who commit acts of violence, whether it's domestic or dating, or violate certain protection orders in Indian country. So why do I think that this is important? And to read this paragraph, I'm going to talk about 2 things real quick. So the first thing is, there is racism inherent in these areas, like the Dakotas that surround some of the reservations. You have people on Facebook, etc., who post pictures of Indigenous people that are suffering from substance abuse issues, and they think it's funny to make fun of them. And I think that it is sad and shows a commentary on the culture that's there. If you can't reach out your hand to help somebody, but want to post pictures of them and laugh or denigrate them, don't call yourself non-racist, because you are lying to yourself. Another part of this that, let me go back to this. So the reason why I talked about how the areas around that were racist is because this allows the tribes to try incidents that happen on their land without having to ship them out to all white juries. If you ship something out to a community that's not actually part of the community, how are they going to not inject their own prejudices into it as far as, that racism is concerned, or to know what's for the best of these tribal communities? Keeping these cases within those communities is, to me, the right way to go. The 2013 reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act is also important because Joe Biden is a co-sponsor on the original act. This is what Donald Trump used as a framework for his executive order for the MMIW, the Murdered Missing Indigenous Women. All he used was the Violence Against Women Act, and he executed it, meaning that he did his job finally in order to push some of these provisions into action, although I'm still waiting to see the results. So, yeah, the Violence Against Women Act is the original MMIW Act, and it was co-sponsored by Joe Biden. For Indian country, these conferences were a big deal. Indian country felt as if someone in power was listening to Native issues and concerns. The tribal conferences proved to be successful because they solidified the respect and trust of nation-to-nation relationships between the federal government and tribal nations. Historically, the federal government's dealings with American Indians have been paternalistic and very one-sided, meaning that they will not honor their treaties. Look at the Fort Laramie Treaty, for instance. Maybe we'll discuss that at some point. I'm going to highlight, not the way that I just did, but the Trump administration ended the White House Tribal Nations Conferences. Even though tribal leaders requested the Tribal Nations Conferences be reinstated, the pleas went on deaf ears. So instead of having these people come in front of you and discuss the things that affect them, Donald Trump's administration has a history of just bringing them in for events that are designed to fluff the leader up. Signing ceremonial bills that have no actual substance, they more as a symbolic substance than any actual teeth. I'm going to use the disclaimer here. I'm going to play an ad by the Donald Trump campaign in which they tout his successes with the coronavirus, and then I'm going to comment on a few things that I feel are out of place. So hold your nose if that's what you do, and let's watch.
President Trump is recovering from the coronavirus, and so is America. Together, we rose to meet the challenge, protecting our seniors, getting them life-saving drugs in record time, sparing no expense. President Trump tackled the virus head-on, as leaders should.
I can't imagine that anybody could be doing more.
We'll get through this together. We'll live carefully, but not afraid.
I'm Donald J. Trump, and I approve this message.
What I'd like to discuss about this video are a couple of things. First of all, it leaves out the 200,000 plus deaths that we've already had from coronavirus. And while we would say that we would have some deaths, I'd like to point out something in particular. Other countries stated how deadly this virus was to its people, locked them down, and they are recovering. As we see countries that have come out of their recovery efforts early, we see a spike in those cases. Our country did no such thing. What our president did was he told people that it was not much worse than the flu. He packed people arm to arm in his rallies. He downplayed the virus. I've had people explain to me before, like I don't understand, that people are adults. They can make whatever decisions that they want. They decided to go to these rallies. I'd like to say that people make their decisions, true, but when you're not providing the proper information for them to make an educated decision, you are setting them up to be killed. That is exactly what happens when you talk about Kung Flu virus and you make a joke out of it, or you say, no, I'm not going to wear a mask, or you say you're going to shake people's hands like you did at the CDC back in March. Okay? We've seen him continue to put people in harm's way, and we've seen him continue to downplay this virus. To pretend that he is doing otherwise is a source of misinformation. And speaking on misinformation, let's talk about the Fauci interview, the little clip with Fauci there. So the way that this campaign ad makes it seem is as though Fauci is talking about Donald Trump. I don't believe anybody could do any better. He was not talking about Donald Trump. This is already an interview that's been released to the public. What he was talking about was the pandemic response team and how they've been working around the clock in order to protect us, in order to get a virus vaccine out, in order to provide PPE and the other things that they've done. He believes that they could not do any better. He was not talking about Donald Trump. He was not talking about Mike Pence. This is an interview that is already out in the public, and they are cherry picking that clip to make it seem as though they are doing more than what they are and that they have their support. They have made it so that Fauci could not go and be interviewed this week with ABC. They've stopped him from doing that. If they really wanted to present Dr. Fauci as the face of their coronavirus response, they wouldn't be holding him back right as they put out this ad, would they? I personally don't think so. If there's anything that you wanted to discuss that we talked about earlier in the video, leave me a comment down below. I love to be able to interact with the community. If you haven't already subscribed, please do so. Click the subscribe button. If you're really into the content, then hit the bell icon and I'll let you know when I am putting up new videos and things like that. You're on the ground level. You can be part of the growth of this channel. If there are things that you'd like to talk about and discuss, we could be doing that in future videos. I would love to. In any case, we're going to end up doing our WTF internet here soon. I think we're going to do that one tomorrow. I'm going to put out a 60-second news video, so stay tuned. The pitch Kanawe. I'll see you again.